My name is Daniel Eric Robinson. I'm a member of the board of directors here at the French and Indian War Foundation. Got involved in reenacting maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, and then met up with Tony Elar and got involved in the foundation. Actually, for a short while, lived 3 houses down on this street, not knowing the fort was there. Lived here before the foundation was established, actually, many years ago. So it's interesting to come back full circle. I want to start out talking about the archaeological investigations that were done prior to my coming on scene. So we had the Thunderbird Archaeological Association back in the late 1990s, I believe it was, came onto the site there, and they did roughly 3 exploratory trenches, mainly in the west side of the fort property here at the house, and one on the south side of the property of the house there, and so forth there. So they were able to find artifacts, and unfortunately they didn't write a detailed report on that at the time, but about 10 years later, the follow-up man, Mr. Jolly, was able to get their field notes and included that stuff as best he could into his report. So along comes the foundation, is established in roughly 2002, if my memory serves me correct, purchases the property, the house that we're standing at right now, the Baker Hardy house, and they brought in Mr. Robert Jolly, who was like head of the archaeology in this area, in the Northwest region or something there. He was involved with the government. So he comes in with his crew of volunteers over a fall and a summer, I'm thinking 2002, 2003 roughly time period, and they excavated 3 roughly 10 to 15 foot long trenches, one of them near the well, the present well, and 2 of them on the front edge of the property bordering Loudoun Street. They found a ton of artifacts on there, and did an excellent report, which we do have a very, very detailed historical report on that on our French and Indian War website. So it's a great report to look at there and so forth. Plenty of details, very professionally done. And then also, one of the things I believe they were trying to establish was try to locate the part of the barracks wall. And I believe from their report that they believe they were able to locate part of the barracks wall near the house here. So that helps set the standards for in this area here. And like I said, once again, their report is extremely comprehensive there, and they included a lot of stuff that was done by the Thunderbird Association there earlier in the 1990s. Okay, then we come to our modern digs here at the fort. Okay, so back in 2002, I believe it was, we were already thinking about moving the well cover off, and we knew the inner edge of the well was relatively smooth. It was relatively stable, but we were concerned about the outer edge of the wall of the well and what that looked like. So I spent a couple weeks during the summer of roughly 2022, if I backdate there, 2022, and dug roughly a 5-foot trench along the south wall of the well structure. And we were able to locate the outside well wall, which was very, very interesting because it was not a solid limestone wall. It actually had stacked limestone pieces along the wall, not mortared together. And that gave us a good indication of what was holding up the concrete slab that was existing on that well there and so forth. So we found some artifacts in there, mainly little bits of pottery, almost no bones. Pottery, we found some buttons down in there, and some shot and so forth. The pottery is not surprising because there was a gazebo on that well for many years. And so people would drop their teacups having a party on a gazebo or something, pick up the big pieces of pottery and sweep the really little pieces off into the grass and so forth. So we did find a lot of little pottery in the upper layers. We refilled that, took photos and so forth, drew a nice sketch of it. So that helped us make aware of what we might be facing once we went into the well itself. We took a 2-year little, and this well, my excavation pit there, which would be labeled T11 if you look at any of the maps that we have, T11 was between the well cover itself and the alleyway running between us and the adjacent property, which I think is 415 North Loudoun Street, if I remember right there. So 2 years later, we decided to go ahead and do another pit, and I chose this pit to the east of T11, maybe about 25 feet, because in between us we had one of the Jolly digs, their trench, and I don't remember their number on their trench, but we did so I wanted to use the Jolly trench for their soil horizons and their depths and the soil expectations, the soil type, so I knew what I would be hitting when I moved to the east and so forth. And then also to the east was one of Thunderbird's little 3x3 test pits, Thunderbird Associates. And you're still to this day able to see their little 3x3 imprint in the ground, so I knew right where it was. And I dug 3 feet off to the side of that. So one thing we were looking for with that dig in T12 is what we labeled that dig there. So in that T12 trench, which was a 3x6 trench, we had to excavate down to roughly 19 inches deep to hit solid limestone. And that was pretty interesting. Not as deep as people would think. But what we were looking for was, many years ago when George Washington was building the fort on the property, he paid a guy called John Christian Hines. He was the guy digging the well. They also paid him to blast off some of the outcrops. This entire area was covered with limestone outcrops, and he did drills and blasted outcrops in the parade area. So I was hoping we might find one of those, and we got lucky in T12. We found roughly 4 to 5 what are called hammerjack auger bit drill holes in there, down in the limestone. I was tickled pink. And we found tons of artifacts, including musket balls, iron spike, a huge iron spike. We found buttons and just so much pottery that's amazing. So we were very pleased with that dig, good enough that we're hoping we've left it open, covered it up, and we hope to perhaps in the future line that with limestone so that we can show people those drill marks in the future, because that is a very unique figure, something very unique. So this past year in 2025, I decided to excavate right next to T12, right against the border of that, anticipating finding more of the drill marks. And then my goal was to determine which of those areas would be the better area for a display down in the future, which had the better drill marks. Ironically, we found no drill marks right next to it. That amazes me, but no drill marks whatsoever in T13 there. But what we did find was a huge flagstone about 6 inches down in the ground. And I was shocked, and we brought out the mason. Now we're doing T12 and T13 in cahoots with M3 Archaeology. That's Mark Ludlow and Mike Kehoe and their workers, and we're doing that in cahoots with them. And so we brought them in to advise us, and I was under constant contact with them. And then we actually brought in a mason to take a look at this flagstone that I found in the middle of the trench. And I was shocked because it was only about 6 to 8 inches deep, and the French and Indian layer is roughly 19 inches deep at that site. So the mason immediately agreed with the archaeologist that this is a flagstone to a building, basically the stepping stone to a building. And so as I dug closer to the house, we immediately ran into more but smaller stepping stones and so forth there. And then the archaeologists ended up probing outside of mine even more towards the house and found yet more. So without a doubt, there's a sidewalk, a homemade sidewalk running towards the house, roughly 6 to 8 inches deep in the soil, which is way newer than the French and Indian time. So that brings into some questions about Donna Light, our board of director member, had done research on this house. And I think the old deeds talk about a structure on the property, and the new deeds refer to the house itself and so forth, back in the 1860s, I think. So we're now suspecting that perhaps this flagstone was dealing with the old original structure, and then the house was built next to it with the sidewalk leading over to it. So that's a whole nother series of digs for down the road. We want to dig up all those flagstones and find out where exactly do they lead to the house itself. So in the end result, I ended up moving the flagstone after careful measurements. We moved the flagstone, dug down to bedrock, and struck a mother load of buttons and musket balls and bullets and cannon not cannonballs, cannon grape shots, you might call them. So a very good dig there. We decided at this time not to dig up the smaller flagstones until we moved to the north because they would be harder to get back into their original place and so forth. So that's for a future dig. So now that turned out very, very well. We did refill that because we went down to bedrock and cleaned it all out. It was refilled until future digs and so forth. So I want to stop before we talk about future archaeological, and I want to talk about, it was a very busy year this past year and a half with M3 archaeology. We did bring them in early last year, I think it was, maybe in early 2005, if my memory suits me. And then they did a... and they did 2025. They did a scan, a GPR, ground penetrating radar scan of the south yard and the west yard, and even the neighbor's yard at 415. The neighbor was nice enough to let them run their ground penetrating radar, and we have excellent reports on our website, French Indian War Foundation website, showing what they saw underneath there, and very, very interesting. They actually were able to run it over the existing concrete of the well to give us a little image down in there before that was removed. So that was super cool. So they did find two areas of interest, not where I dug. I would never dig where they found areas of interest. They found one near our patio area, a disturbance, and then they found one down by our large maple tree, I think it is, down there by the sugar maple tree. So those are two areas of disturbance. One we believe is within the Northwest Bastion area, and the other one originally they thought might be a stairwell to the basement that was filled in, but they were unable to locate that. So that'll be in future digs, probably involving M3 archaeology when they bring in their crew of volunteers. So a little later in the summer with M3 archaeology, we did bring them in to do another metal detecting of the entire property. They brought in about 4 or 5 guys with high caliber metal detectors. They ran over every inch of the yard. We dug up all the hits, and they carefully provided reports on everything was dug, and they did GPS markings of every hole that was excavated. So those are nice maps. A little bit later in the fall, we decided to do it on the north side of the property, and we brought M3 Archaeology in again, Mark Ludlow and Mike Kehoe and their supporters in. We ran the ground penetrating radar over the north side of the property, which is right there by the driveway, our driveway. No disturbances were detected in that area. We didn't really expect any. We think that falls outside of the wall of the fort. Now, a lot of these assumptions are based on Norman Baker, who sort of put the angle of the fort together many years ago. We have blueprints of what the fort looked like, 2 different blueprints of the fort, but the exact angle that the fort was turned at is all based upon the well. And a lot of that was based on Norman's guess on the angle and so forth there. So we're pretty happy that that turned up nothing. And then we ended up doing metal detecting on the north side and shovel test pits up there, retrieving yet more artifacts, very interesting artifacts, several Civil War artifacts, because we do know there was a Civil War layer on top of the layer. Our test holes did determine, though, we learned that basically, it's about 18 to 19 inches down to the bedrock of the French and Indian layer. This entire area would have been an outcrop of rock. There was literally no dirt, hardly to speak of on here. I sometimes have obtained 1 inch to 2 inch maximum of the very dark, rich soil that would have been French and Indian decayed leaves and so forth there. You can tell it immediately when you hit it and so forth there. So the 12 inches above it is basically the walls that were torn down. They tore down the fort walls, leveled out the entire backyard and front yards, and that was the 12 inches of clay, motley clay, mixed with fragmented rock and so forth. And then on top of that, we've discovered the 6 to 8 inches of very dark topsoil that somebody has brought in and put over top the sidewalk. So we thank M3 for what they're doing. We do have more plans in the work for M3 here, by the way. So we have made an arrangement with them, and we're looking at digging a couple test pits underneath the house itself. Now, the north side of the house has a basement, so it's already been damaged. But the south side of the house has a crawl space underneath there. And so we plan on excavating a couple test pits under the crawl space and to use that to determine what are the soil layers. We anticipate finding no artifacts at all underneath the house because if Norman Baker's right, the house was built on top of the barracks. So I don't anticipate any artifacts at all. But we do want to determine, is there the dark black soil layer? Is there soil layer, sorry, is the 12 inches of soil clay, motley clay with rock from the fort underneath, and is it the dark black rich organic material that was originally here? And that'll help us determine when the house was built. Donna's research, and I might be wrong on this, but I believe Donna's research has the house roughly around Civil War time, but there was a structure perhaps 30 years earlier. So this with M3 helping us dig underneath there should be able to establish when was the foundation of that house put under there. And that's a very important question for our site. So we're looking forward to that there and so forth. And then we've really, like I said, we've done our shovel test pits for the property. We've got a good look at that. We've done ground penetrating over the entire thing. So our next full-fledged dig will probably be again this summer. We will most likely excavate another pit in the south side of the yard, but we are trying to determine, we're working with the site plan committee and so forth there before we make our next dig. We are trying to make sure that our digs are as little intrusive as possible. We're making sure we have been, oh, by the way, so they have been working around the well. So we have been having a crew work around the well. Ashby, I think it is Masonry, is working around Ashby Masonry. Okay, I think is working around the well, and they've had to do some support structures around the well itself so it'll hold up our safety grill and so forth. And so we have been sifting very carefully and metal detecting all the debris found around that well itself, even though it is upper layers and so forth here, because basically here the soil was in 3 layers. So we are being very careful. Any holes that are dug on the property, everything is sifted and categorized and labeled. M3 has been great with helping with identifying every artifact we found in the last 2 years. We've had a session or 2 with them this year already, got another one scheduled, so that we can have the professionals, with their help, identify all these little fragments of bone and pottery, glass, so many cannon shot that it's just incredible. But it is something we really rely a lot upon them. So there's tons more work to do upon the site. The GPR is a blessing in disguise up here. That allowed us to have smaller digs without worrying about hurting any kind of foundations or anything that would have been in place. So I do want to thank Donna Light there and one of the board members and Eric Moore. They helped on some of the excavations and it really came in. We got some beautiful artifacts that we're looking forward to being able to display to the public in the future as we move forward with an interpretive center on the property. I hate to say our archaeological team, including me, is getting a little older here as we go and so forth there. And we did have a lot of volunteers for our shovel test pits where we're very, very time consuming, and be glad to welcome volunteers as we move into our under the house dig and our house dig to the south of the property. The best way is to contact Donna Light here at the French and Indian Foundation. She's our current president. She helps out with this. She'll put us in with, even though M3 Archaeology is actually leading the way on this, we like to try to provide them with volunteers when we can. We'll have, we always need volunteers to sift, volunteers to dig. We do our digging with a trowel, by the way, no shovels used at all. And so it does take very labor intensive, but there's a certain joy when you find and bring up a piece of clay pottery that's been in the ground for 150 years. I pulled up probably a 14-inch spike out of the ground, was shocked. And that spike, without a doubt to me, was created by George Washington's blacksmith who worked here on this site. And so the trophies are, and we've actually located things as obscure as fake jewelry cufflinks. And that was a surprise to find a cufflink 19 inches down. So volunteers are very welcome. I also have a Friends of Fort Loudoun site, actually Winchester Friends of Fort Loudoun site there, Facebook also, and it's on there, and I'll be glad to get you connected with Dawn and myself there, because we had a couple volunteers help with the sifting and so forth there. And actually, so we're welcome volunteers. And let me backtrack to one other thing we did about 2 years ago, I guess it's been now. We actually have a cistern in the backyard. We call it the Big Pimple. It's a cistern in the backyard. The archaeologists love it. They said it's a very rare version of a cistern. And so we removed the dirt around that cistern that had been piled up over the years so that we could run the ground penetrating radar real tight in against it. And of course, I had a nice volunteer help me with that for a couple of days, sifting through that dirt, found some artifacts and some actually modern pistol shells, which was very interesting, casings. We found probably 5 of those on the property, and I wouldn't imagine that people would stand here in downtown Winchester shooting off pistol rounds, but we found about 5 of those on the property, which adds to the mystery. But I just want the public to know that everything we do is finely sifted. The upper layers are quarter inch sifted as per archaeological records, and then the lower layers are double sifted through 1/16 inch screen. So we're very conscientious. We now have the material all stored here. M3 was great about the other day. We had them take a look and work with us with the old Jolly artifacts. The Jolly artifacts are on site also, and we had them take a second look at the Jolly artifacts to try to organize them into groups and so forth. So we are looking towards the future there.